Wendy Keith and Walden Whitman. They're both my favorites. They're singers and songwriters for a long time, and they always make me laugh. Walden plays a lot of instruments. He's a member of Tattoo and Folk Soul Band, and he's a great painter. And Wendy has 4 original LPs and 2 recent singles. Soon to be released is Don't Stop Now. Now, I don't want you to think I'm disparaging Wendy. I think she's great, but her band is called Wendy Keith and Her Alleged Band. Here they are, Wendy Keith and Walden Whitman.
Thank you, Senator.
Summertime, when the living is easy, fish are jumping and the cotton is high. Your daddy's rich and your mama's good looking. So hush, little baby, don't you cry. One of these mornings you're gonna rise up singing, gonna spread your wings and take to the sky. But until that morning, there ain't nothing to harm you. Your daddy and mommy standing by. Summertime, when the living is easy, fish are jumping and the cotton is high. Your daddy's rich and your mama's good looking. So hush, so baby, don't you cry, don't you cry, don't you cry.
Thank you. Thank you, Seth Jugget. Thank you, everyone on the Lyceum Committee. We're really happy to be here.
Last night I dreamed I was in slavery, but it was the time. Nothing about to ease my mind. Out of the mine, out of the night, appeared a lady leading a distant pilgrim band. First mate, she cried, pointing her hand, make room for this young one. Come on up, oh, I got a lifetime. Come on up to the straight
lifetime. Come on up to the strain of mine. She said her name was Harriet Tubman, and she drove for the Underground
Railroad, railroad. Then I awoke, no more I faltered, finding new strength and paths unknown. Sisters, brothers fleeing their homes, they're seeing people all they've known. They're fleeing homes in Guatemala, Chile, Brazil, El Salvador, fleeing from the prisons and war, night and through Mexico to our door, singing, come on up, oh, 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 I got a lifetime, come on up to the strain of mine, come on up, oh, 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 I got a lifetime, come on up
to the strain of mine. Said her name was Harriet Tubman, and she drove for the Underground
Railroad,
Railroad.
railroad.
Thank you so much.
Well, this next song gives us a little bit different image than many of us carry around our Honorable Abe Lincoln. That in researching some songs from the period, found out, according to Alan Lomax and others, that this was actually one of Abe Lincoln's favorite, if not the favorite song. And he would sometimes gather with a friend of his who was a banjo player, and he would accompany the banjo player on the harmonica. So I don't know about you, but I never really imagined Abe Lincoln sitting there playing harmonica with a banjo player. But and the song is something that I'm sure is in our, combined memories of. Written by an abolitionist and dealing with the relationship between the master and the slave and a blue-tail fly. Please join us when we get to the Jimmy Crack Corn and I Don't Care part. Please, I'm sure that'll come up in your memory.
This was also one of my favorite songs growing up because I get to sing, I don't care, I don't care. Oh, that's not how it starts. It starts slowly. When I was young, I used to wait on master and serve him his place and pass the bottle when he got dry and brush away the blue-tailed fly. Jimmy Crack Corn, I don't care. Jimmy Crack Corn, I don't care. Jimmy Crack Corn, I don't care. My master's gone away. And when he rode in the afternoon, I'd follow with a hickory broom, the pony being rather shy when bitten by the blue-tailed fly. Jimmy Crack Corn, I don't care. Jimmy Crack Corn, I don't care. Jimmy Crack Corn, I don't care. My master's gone away. One day he rode around the farm, the flies so numerous they did swarm. One chanced to bite him on the thigh. The devil take the blue-tailed fly. Jimmy Crack Corn, I don't care. Jimmy Crack Corn, I don't care. Jimmy Crack Corn, I don't care. My master's gone away. The pony run, he jumped, he pitched, he threw my master in the ditch. He died and the jury wondered why. The victim was the blue-tailed fly. Jimmy Crack Corn and I don't care. Jimmy Crack Corn and I don't care. Jimmy Crack Corn and I don't care. My master's gone away. They laid him under a simmon tree. His epitaph was there to see. Beneath this stone I'm forced to lie. a victim of the blue-tailed fly. Jimmy crack corn and I don't care. Jimmy crack corn and I don't care. Jimmy crack corn and I don't care. My master's gone away.
Old master's dead and laid to rest. They say all things is for the best. I never shall forget until the day I die. Oh, massa, and the blue-tailed fly.
Jimmy crack corn and I don't care. Jimmy crack corn and I don't care. Jimmy crack corn and I don't care. My master's gone away. Everybody. Jimmy crack corn and I don't care. Jimmy crack corn and I don't care. Jimmy crack corn and I don't care. My master's gone away. Thank you. Walden Whittam.
Well, this next song is not from 1860. This is a Wendy Keith original song.
And it was written shortly after 2016. It's called Pledge. I pledge allegiance to our hearts, the united parts of our body, the sensuality, pure desire, one passion under stars, indivisible with loving and justice for us. I pledge allegiance to all my beloveds, the collective love of community, and to our survival, which has to stand one nation under love and commitment to a stronger world in our universe. And I will not pledge allegiance to leaders whose greed is threatening to kill us all. And I will not pledge allegiance to people who suck the life and the love from a room. Dear universe, protect us from hatred, deflect us, keep safe all of our tender souls. For loving and giving all the gifts you have left us, we are the keepers, the writers and the seekers, all of us children of the stars. Dear universe, protect us. Hatred, deflect us. Keep safe all of our tender souls, for loving and giving the gift you have left us. We are the keepers, the writers and the seekers, all of us children of the stars. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Well, for this song, we're once again going back to 1860 for when this tune was written. However, showing that this tune really has legs, as we say, in terms of longevity, you may find that, as some others did, that the tune was so well loved that another American borrowed it and added some of his own lyrics that might be more familiar to most of us. As the blackbird in the spring 'neath the willow tree sat and piped, I heard him sing of Oralee. Oralee, Oralee, maid with golden hair. Sunshine came along with thee, and swallows in the air. In thy blush the rose was born, music when you spake. Through thine azure eyes the morn sparkling seemed to break. Oralee, Oralee, maid with golden hair. Sunshine came along with thee, and swallows in the air. Love me tender, love me sweet, never let me go. You have made my life complete, and I love you so. Oralee, Oralee, maid with golden hair. Sunshine came along with thee, and swallows in the air.
Thank you so much. I've sung this song very, very many times, and I understand that there's a great deal of mythology around this song, much of which is not true, that it was allegedly written by a slave trader who had a spiritual awakening, turned his slave ship around and went back to Africa. That never happened, by the way. But I did read, there's actually an entire book called Amazing Grace, which details the history of Amazing Grace. And essentially, the slave trader got ill, too ill to be a ship captain, changed careers and became a minister. And in that time as a minister, he and another minister wrote a lot of hymns that are still remain in Christian hymnals, which traveled from Great Britain to the United States. And this song escaped the church walls and became a spiritual and a well-known song among many. So please sing with us if you so desire.
Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I'm found, was blind, but now I see. 'Twas grace that brought my heart to fear, grace my fears relieved. How precious did that grace appear the hour I first believed. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I'm found, was blind, but now I see. Amazing grace has set me free to taste, to touch, to feel the wonders of accepting love have made me whole and real. Everybody.
Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I'm found, was blind, but now I see.
Was blind, but now I see.
Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you. Thank you all. Beautiful singing. We have time for one more. This is a more lively song. Also, we request that you sing with us.
Dealing with perhaps the recommended method of travel when one is fleeing to the north.
Wade in the water, wade
wade in the water. God gonna trouble the water. See those children dressed in white. God gonna trouble the water. Well, they must be the children of the Israelites.
God gonna trouble the water.
He said, wade
Wade
in the water.
wade in the water.
Wade in the water.
Wade in the water, children, wade
in the water. God gonna trouble the water. Well, you see those children dressed in red. God gonna trouble the water. Well, they must be the children that Moses led.
God gonna trouble the water.
Wade
Wade in the water.
Wade in the water.
Wade in the water, children, wade in the water. God gonna trouble the water. The river Jordan is deep and wide.
God gonna trouble the water.
You know there's milk and honey on the other side.
God trouble the water.
Oh, wade in the water.
Wade in the water.
Wade in the water, children, wade in the water. God's gonna trouble the water. Well, the river Jordan is deeply and cold.
God gonna trouble the water.
You know it chills the body, but it warms the soul.
God gonna trouble the water.
Oh,
Wade
wade
in the water.
wade in the water.
Wade in the water.
Wade in the water, children, wade in the water. God gonna trouble the water.
You see those children dressed in blue.
God gonna trouble the water.
Well, they must be the children that Moses knew.
God gonna trouble the water.
Everybody wade in the water. Wade in the water, children, wade in the water. God gonna trouble the water. One more time. Wade in the water. Wade in the water, children, wade in the water. God gonna trouble the water. I said, God gonna trouble the water. God gonna trouble the Thank you all. Thank you all so much. Thank you.
Wow, thank you. A little bit more applause for them, please. Before we get started, I'd like to let you all know there are still some headsets, earphones in the back. So if any of you have trouble hearing, Franz has earphones that might help you to enjoy the program better. And there's still about a dozen or so there. Raise your hand and he'll bring them to you. Okay. We'd like to acknowledge our season sponsor, Microspect, and the sponsor of this talk, Phil Runyon and the Runyon Law Office, and Rosalie's Garden for the flowers. We're also grateful to our community sponsors. They're all listed in your program. And we're grateful to all of you here and online for joining us, and we appreciate your support. We can't do this without you. Here in the church, you can leave your donations in the glass bowl here in the front and in the parish hall. And the green cards in your pew are for your name and contact info if you'd like to be on our mailing list, or if you have suggestions, comments, critiques, complaints, put them on the card and put them in the bowl, and if you're online, you can leave it in the live chat. Okay, our sponsor of today's talk is Professor Mary Kelly. She's taught American and Irish history at Franklin Pierce University for almost 30 years, and she works to help us all appreciate the relevance of history to us all today. Recently, she served as a facilitator for community discussions on the Ken Burns documentary, The American Revolution, which was part of the New Hampshire Humanities Big Watch series. She hails from the west part of Ireland, and she enjoys New Hampshire landscape that, despite its masses of pine trees, keeps her close to nature and reasonably close to the Atlantic Ocean. Please welcome Professor Mary Kelly.
Thank you very much, Sat, and good morning. I am Professor Mary Kelly, and I'll be your moderator today. Can you hear me okay? Can everyone hear me? It's a pleasure to welcome you to the Monadnock Summer Lyceum with today's guest speaker, Professor Lou Masur. Following his presentation, Lou will take questions from the audience, and you may write questions on the yellow cards in the pews, and an usher will come around to collect them. For those of you watching virtually, please submit questions by using the live chat feature on YouTube. So after the program, we invite you to attend an informal reception in the parish hall through the door to my right. So our speaker today is Dr. Lou Masur, Board of Governors Distinguished Professor of American Studies and History at Rutgers University. A cultural and political historian, he is author of many books, each of which focuses on a discrete moment or event. He dedicated his latest book, A Journey North, Jefferson, Madison, and the Forging of Friendship, to his 4 grandsons. After the book was published, he had a 5th grandson and is now writing a book that he will dedicate to him. He's only 8 months old, so he doesn't yet know about Lincoln, but all the other boys do. Regarding his book, 1831, Year of Eclipse, which I happen to have used in some of my own classes, a renowned reviewer wrote, quote, "It was the year of Nat Turner's slave rebellion, of the launching of Garrison's Liberator, of Tocqueville's visit to the United States, of Cyrus McCormick's invention of the mechanical reaper, and of many other pivotal events. Annus Mirabilis. 1831 became the hinge of fate for the future of America, both good and ill. Lou Masur has captured the flavor of this crucial year in this captivating book," unquote. And that's from a review by Professor James McPherson, who is a noted 19th century and Civil War era historian. This same ability to capture a moment in time and invite his readers to share in those moments underlie his other books on a single focus. On a Photograph, Old Glory, a seminal record album, Runaway Dream, Born to Run, and Bruce Springsteen's American Vision, and the First World Series in his book, Autumn Glory. For his capacity to pinpoint signal episodes and events in American history, and his ability to transport us back to those days and times, it is a pleasure to welcome a distinguished historian of our time to address the Monadnock Summer Lyceum. Professor Masur's work reminds us that history is not simply a record of what happened, but a way of asking better questions about the world we inhabit. And at a moment when the past is often contested, simplified, or even forgotten, that work matters enormously. Please join me in warmly welcoming Professor Masur.
Thank you so much, Mary. Can everyone hear okay? Yes, I'm exhausted from hearing all those things that I've done. And the thing about my grandkids, so I had this nightmare that the newest grandson one day was going to see the other book that was dedicated to their brothers and cousins and say, freaking grandpa, why didn't he dedicate a book to me? And so I did. And it's such an honor to be here. I mean, you mentioned 1831. This Lyceum dates from even before that time. And so what an honor to address you all. I love Abraham Lincoln. I literally love him. And by the time we're done this morning, I hope to persuade you to love him as well. Oh, I know you like him, you admire him, you think well of him, but I want to get you to love him. And the place to begin, we'll get some slides up here of good old Abe, is in 1858, he was interviewed. It was a sort of survey for the Congressional Directory. And he was asked a bunch of questions. First question was born, and he answered February 12th, 1809, Hardin County, Kentucky. And the second question was education, and he answered defective. It's the place to begin with understanding Lincoln, and I think in some ways with understanding much of American history. I mean, what were his chances? This poor kid born of an illiterate father in a dirt floor cabin, what were the odds of him succeeding, of him getting out of that life of toil? And he got lucky. When his mother passed and his father remarried, his stepmother did the most important thing you could possibly do. She brought books. And it's as simple and yet as complicated as that. His love of reading, the ways in which books and education transported him to another world. And we know some of the books he read. Of course, the Bible, Aesop's Fable, Bunyan's Pilgrim's Progress. He read all of Euclid. He loved Shakespeare. He could quote ream after ream after ream of Shakespeare. Education to him was everything. And it's one of the great stories of American history, upward mobility through education. It's Ben Franklin's story, the youngest son of the youngest son. What were his chances but for learning to read and write and print? Or Frederick Douglass, who told us in his narrative that the key to his emancipation was literacy. You free the mind, and the body soon followed. In his very first public address, Lincoln, is his 1832, so he's 24 years old. He's already out there campaigning. He wrote, upon the subject of education, I can only say that I view it as the most important subject which a people can be engaged in. It helped in other ways as well. And here's one of his early books, school books, that have survived. He didn't have a lot of formal education, and he regretted that for the rest of his life, but he made up for it on his own. To understand Lincoln, I think we have to understand two important things. One, he suffered terribly from what in the 19th century they called melancholy, right? We would call it depression. He had a sort of sadness about him. You could see it in the photographs. People who met him talked about this kind of sadness around his eyes. He seldom smiled. He took things to heart. At times, he was so desperate that his good friend Joshua Speed said that they had to keep his penknife away from him for fear that he might hurt himself. So what do you do when you suffer from this kind of overcoming melancholy? In fact, the word in the 19th century was hypochondria, the hypos. If you read Moby Dick, the great opening line of Moby Dick, Ishmael says, whenever I have the hypos, I go to sea. Lincoln had the hypos. compounding that was this. Anyone who saw him thought he was the homeliest human being they had ever laid eyes on. He was tall, gangly, sort of, I often feel like I'm describing myself when I describe him, 6'3", with this protruding Adam's apple, elephantine ears. I have in my computer a file that I've kept for decades of people who wrote about Lincoln after meeting him and what they had to say about him. I'll just give you one example. The great poet Walt Whitman was volunteering in Armory Hospital in Washington at the time of the war, and he wrote letters home to his mother, Louisa. And in one letter, he writes, and he says, I see the president nearly every day. He's like a Hoosier Michelangelo, so awful ugly, he's nearly beautiful. So what do you do if you're prone to depression and you think there's something odd-looking, weird about you? You either shrivel up and fade away, or you develop mechanisms in order to cope. And Lincoln found those mechanisms. One of them was jokes. He loved to laugh, right? Laughter was an antidote to all that sadness that filled him. And he collected jokes and he told jokes. Now this is a problem with Lincoln studies. Anyone who knew Lincoln dined out on Lincoln stories for the rest of their lives. So there's lots of things that are attributed to Lincoln that Lincoln probably didn't say, but I've sussed through a lot of that. And here are some examples of things that we know he said. So I'll give you one example of a kind of classic Lincoln line. He's debating Stephen Douglas, and he stands up and he says, my opponent accuses me of being two-faced. If I was two-faced, why would I be wearing the one that I'm wearing? Perfect, right? You learn self-deprecation in order to succeed. And by the way, right, he was a lawyer, right, Phil? So imagine his success in front of juries, being able to sort of make them laugh, to tell stories. And that's the other part of it, the storytelling. He was known for his stories. His political opponents made fun of him. They mocked him. They thought, my goodness, we're in the middle of a war. How could he be telling stories? How could he be telling jokes? The Democrats said, oh, this reminds me of a joke. This reminds me of a little story. Meanwhile, he was just the jester. But those stories were more than just sort of tales to amuse. They served certain purposes, certain didactic purposes. So I'm going to tell you a story that I feel very confident that Lincoln actually told, because the person who heard it went back and wrote it down in their diary immediately after meeting with the president. So let me set the scene for you. The war has just begun. Lincoln, of course, is elected as a Republican, the first Republican elected president, 1860. They first ran a candidate in 1856. And the Republican Party was an anti-slavery party, free soil, free men. And Lincoln, of course, was anti-slavery. He's not an abolitionist, but he's against slavery. We could talk more about that distinction. But one of the radical Republicans, right, as in any time, there's a spectrum in the political party. We would call Lincoln a moderate. One of the more radical Republicans comes to see him. The war has just begun. And he says to him, Mr. President, you are elected on an anti-slavery platform. When are you going to do something about slavery? Now, this is a really tough question, because he knew if he says he's going to act against slavery, he's going to alienate all those Northern Democrats who don't want the war to be a war against slavery. But if he says, I'm not going to do anything, he's going to alienate members of his own political party. What do you do? What do you say? Well, that reminds me of a party of Methodist parsons that were traveling to Illinois when I was a boy. They had a branch to cross. It was pretty bad. It was ugly to cross, because the waters was up. They got considering and discussing how they should get across it. They talked about it for 2 hours. One of them thought they ought to cross this way, and one of them said they ought to go another way. And they got quarreling about it. So at last, one old brother put in, he says, brethren, this here talk's no use. I never cross a river till I come to it. Thank you very much for coming. It was good to see you. I mean, you can imagine this guy going back and his friends saying, what did he say? What did he say? What's he going to do about slavery? I don't know, something about a river and falling in and getting wet. But that's part of his political genius, right? His ability to maneuver through these situations. Now, not all stories were intended in this way. There was one visitor who came, and he left the White House and complained to Lincoln's secretary that he was disgusted. He was disgusted after being interrupted constantly by a silly, grotesque, inapplicable anecdote. And the visitor complained. He says, you say Lincoln's stories have some object or moral. Can you please tell me what object or moral such an absurd, irrelevant, clownish story could possibly have? What object? The most necessary object in the world at the time. To get rid of you and to get on with his business. Now, I want you to take a minute and take a look at this photograph because it's one of the most important photographs ever in American history. And I'm going to exaggerate only slightly when I make the following statement. This photograph helped get Lincoln elected president. Discuss. Well, we will discuss. Let me set the scene for you. Lincoln has come to New York, February 1860. It's one of the most important political speeches he's ever going to deliver. Remember, he's from Illinois. Illinois in 1860, it's the West. He's seen as a frontiersman. He's seen as a rube, as a yokel, as this unsophisticated country bumpkin. So he comes to New York, and this is the backyard of William Seward. He's the presumptive nominee for the presidency, Senator Seward. And so he knows that this speech is going to be huge. That will be the Cooper Union address, which I'm not going to talk about today, but I'm going to talk about this photograph. He goes to Matthew Brady's gallery, and he has his picture taken. And this is the picture that he has taken. And when I teach my Civil War class, I tell students, I'll invite you to do the same, to sort of read the photograph, right? Photographs don't speak for themselves. We make them speak, and they need to be read. It's a form of visual literacy, right? That's part of the power of photographs. And this is 1860. Photography is invented in 1839. This is a whole new world to people, seeing their photographic image. So here's the statement. This photograph helped get Lincoln elected president. How? How do you read the photograph? Go ahead, yell something out. Serious. I know you're used to just sitting back, but he looks distinguished. What details? Give me a detail then. There you go. Hand on the Bible. Hand on the books. Look at that left hand. Whatever the books are, they may be props in Brady's studio, but he's learned. He's educated, right? We're going to emphasize that. Fantastic. You're going to get an A in today's class for that. Okay. What else? Any other details? Strike anybody? What's that? He looks intellectual. So let's talk about the gaze, right? The Union is in trouble. This is going to be one of the most important elections in American history, the election of 1860. We need someone who might steer us through the trouble. I mean, look at that gaze. He looks sober and sturdy and smart and serious. And a couple of little things that Brady did to make him look even better. He pulls the collar up over that Adam's apple. And notice the hair is combed over his ears. So he looks distinguished. All right, and we know that politicians down to this day are always grooming themselves for the camera. There's another detail here that I love, and it's the right hand. To me, and I spend way too much time thinking about that sleeve protruding through his coat. I mean, to me, that left hand that the right hand is strength, right? There's real power there. Carl Sandburg, who wrote a multi-volume biography of Lincoln, said of Lincoln, he was equal parts velvet and iron. I love that. I think in this photo, the left hand is velvet, the right hand is iron. Well, he does indeed get elected, and famously, he grows a beard. Now, many of you know the story of Lincoln growing the beard. But as a Lincoln scholar, I have an obligation to tell the story every time I get a chance because it's one of the great stories in American history. He grows the beard between his election and his inauguration. Why does he grow the beard? He gets a letter from an 11-year-old girl from Westfield, New York, telling him that she thinks he should grow a beard. Here's the letter. Not the actual letter. I wish I owned the actual letter. 11-year-old girl, Grace Bedell. My father has just come home from the fair and brought home your picture. Oh my goodness, do I love that, right? I don't know for a fact it's the photo I just showed you. There's a good chance it was. So that's perfect evidence of the way in which images circulated and their importance. I'm a little girl, only 11 years old, but I want you should be president of the United States very much, and I hope you won't think me very bold to write to such a great man as you. Have you any little girls? If so, give them my love and tell them to write to me if you cannot answer this letter. I've got 4 brothers, and some of them will vote for you anyway, and if you let your whiskers grow, I will try and get the rest of them to vote for you. Wait. It gets better. You would look a great deal better because your face is so thin. Even an 11-year-old girl thought there was something funky looking about this guy. All the ladies like whiskers, and they would tease their husbands to vote for you, and then you would be president. My father is going to vote for you. And if I was a man, I would vote for you too. Just amazing. She says she has to go. If you can, direct your letter to Grace Bedell, Chautauqua County, New York. Goodbye. Lincoln answers. Of course he does. He's a politician. You never know what constituent one day may vote for you. But listen to how he answers the letter. My dear little miss, your very agreeable letter is received. I regret the necessity of saying I have no daughters. I have 3 sons, one 17, one 9, and one 7. They with their mother constitute my whole family. As to the whiskers, having never worn any, do you not think people would call it a piece of silly affectation if I were to begin it now? Your sincere well-wisher, Abe Lincoln. He's writing to an 11-year-old girl, right? But that's classic Lincoln style. Why make a statement when you can ask a rhetorical question? And you use the rhetorical question as a device to express what your own concern is and to have somebody sort of answer it back. It's a wonderful moment, one of the great moments in American history. He does indeed grow a beard. I like to think it's his war beard. He's getting prepared for the conflict that is about to arrive. All right, let's dig into Lincoln as president and the problem of emancipation, the big question, the big issue. He does not act against slavery when he becomes president, despite the fact that he's anti-slavery. That's clear. I'm naturally anti-slavery, he said. I cannot remember a time and a place where I did not think and feel so. On and on, he always spoke against slavery. But he doesn't act against slavery, not for 2 years. Why? Why doesn't he act? Several reasons that I have to give you. First, he doesn't have the power to do so. This is often misunderstood from critics of Lincoln who say, well, why didn't he just abolish slavery from the start? He can't. Slavery is a state institution governed by state laws. The federal government had no power over slavery where it existed. The issue was the expansion of slavery into the territories. That's the precipitate cause in many ways of the Civil War, right? They wanted to stop it from spreading. But as to abolishing it where it exists, it's a state institution, a state decision, not a federal decision. That's one. Number two, Lincoln never accepted the legitimacy or legality of secession. That has huge implications. Secession, he said, it's an ingenious sophism. He called it the essence of anarchy. No country ever allowed for its dissolution by letting people leave. If you're unhappy with the results of an election, Lincoln would say in his first inaugural, there are three things you could do. You could wait 4 years and vote again. You can pass a constitutional amendment that addresses the issue that made you want to secede in the first place. In this case, the issue was slavery. And indeed, there are some attempts to pass a constitutional amendment that would have protected slavery. And that would have been the 13th Amendment instead of the 13th Amendment that abolishes slavery. And third, you can overthrow the government. What you can't do is leave. Now, that has really important implications constitutionally and legally. It means that even if you say you're leaving, you're still entitled to all of your rights as citizens, and that includes the right to slaves. It meant that whenever he referred to the Civil War, and here he is meeting with his generals at Antietam, and meeting with McClellan, it means that whenever he spoke about it, and I don't know if you could see this, but on that tiger, the name on the tiger is rebellion. It was a rebellion. It was an illegal, extra-legal, unconstitutional attempt to destroy the country, and Lincoln would have none of it. So that's the second reason why he doesn't act against slavery. All right, everybody with me? Third reason. There are 15 slave states in the United States. 11 of them secede. 4 of them remained in the Union. Extra credit on the exam if you can name those 4, right? Missouri, Kentucky, Maryland. Anybody here originally from Delaware? No, good. Delaware, nobody cares. But Missouri and Kentucky are a big deal. Lincoln said, I would love to have God on my side, but I must have Kentucky. And the fear is that if he acts against slavery, it's going to prompt Kentucky and Missouri to secede, to join the Confederacy. That may have changed completely the balance of power with respect to the war. So another reason why he doesn't act is because early in the war, he's constantly making overtures to those border states, they're called, slave states that remain in the Union. All right, 3 things, and here's the 4th, big one. Even if you abolish slavery, what do you do about the 4 million former enslaved persons who would now be freed? This is a huge issue that confronts most Americans throughout the first half of the 19th century. What do you do with them? Lincoln was an early proponent of colonization. This is one of the panaceas that is devised as a solution, in quotes, to the problem of race, which, again, we have to understand it in 19th century terms, right? Their anxiety is this: if you view the enslaved as one of 2 ways, you either saw them as docile and childlike, infantilized by the institution of slavery, therefore how could they become citizens, or you saw them as savage and barbaric, in which the same thing applies. So colonization becomes this kind of panacea. They can voluntarily migrate to other countries. Liberia is founded as a colony for former slaves and free blacks in the United States, right? The capital is Monrovia. Why is it named after James Monroe? Because Madison, Jefferson, Monroe, up through Lincoln were all proponents of colonization. I want to read to you from a speech, the Peoria speech that Lincoln gave in 1854. If all earthly power were given me, I should not know what to do about the existing institution. It's an amazing statement because by 1861, all earthly power will have been given to him. My first impulse would be to free the slaves and send them to Liberia, to their own native land. But a moment's reflection would convince me that whatever high hope there is, its execution is impossible. Of course, it's ridiculous to be able to do. What then? Free them all and keep them among us as underlings? It's quite certain that this betters their condition. I would not hold one in slavery at any rate, yet the point is not clear enough for me to denounce people upon. What next? Free them and make them politically and socially our equals? My own feelings will not admit of this. And if mine would, we know that those of the great mass of white people would not. Here's today's takeaway about Lincoln and his greatness. His greatness is that he was evolutionary, not revolutionary. His greatness is that we can watch him change his mind over time. He would take in a variety of opinions. He would read widely. He would adjust to changing circumstances. And when need be, his opinion would evolve. What that meant was in July of 1862, he made the decision to issue an Emancipation Proclamation. On September 22nd, 1862, he issued a preliminary Emancipation Proclamation saying that on January 1st, 1863, I'm going to free the slaves. September 22nd to January 1st is 100 days. And one of my Lincoln books is called Lincoln's 100 Days, that talks about the evolution that occurred in that period. I won't go into detail now about that, except to say that despite everything that happened, imagine the hysteria. I mean, here are some of the anti-Lincoln cartoons. What? You're going to free the slaves on January 1st? In this cartoon, he's seen as a madman. The devil is on his desk. John Brown is one of his heroes. Or he's seen as the devil removing his mask. King Abraham, he's a dictator who by fiat is going to free the slaves. Or, I love this. This is on the cover of my book, which is actually back there after today's lecture. I love this print because it captures some of the messiness. It's like I play Where's Waldo with this thing. You know, you look at all the details, like he's in his nightgown, he's sleepy, he has the Bible, the Constitution on his lap. There's all kinds of little details in there. Buchanan is hanging by his neck in the background. There are petitions. He's struggling. But he has made the decision to free the slaves, and he does so despite the fact that in the November elections, off-year elections, his party gets destroyed. People go to him, they say, Mr. President, nice try with this Emancipation Proclamation, but politically it's not being supported by the populace, you have to withdraw it. And you know what he says? The promise having been made, it must be kept. And on January 1st, 1863, he issues the Emancipation Proclamation. Now, some of you are thinking, wait a minute, Professor, didn't you say he doesn't have the power to free the slaves? And the answer is that's true, but he frees them not as president, but as commander-in-chief. He frees them as a military necessity to help bring the war to an end. That's why it doesn't free all the slaves. The Emancipation Proclamation does not apply to those 4 border states. They're in the Union. It does not apply to those areas in the Confederacy which are under Union control. But out of approximately 4 million slaves, it frees some 3.4 million slaves on paper. It does something else terribly important. These are people waiting. Can you imagine what it must have been like December 31st, 1862? Waiting for Jubilee Day, waiting for this moment of freedom. Little known or appreciated is that the Emancipation Proclamation also authorizes the enlistment of black soldiers. Oh my goodness, I can't say enough about how important that is. Here again, he changed his mind. He was against it. He said, are you kidding me? We're going to put guns in the hands of former slaves and free blacks and send them south to fight? He said it would turn the war into savagery. It would be impossible. It would turn all those bayonets force against us. But no. He comes to realize that, quote, the colored population is the great available and unavailed force for restoring the Union. It's hard to read, but the caption, and again, let's acknowledge the racist caricature of the black soldier who's diminutive and has big lips, but I love that Lincoln is seated and his hand is on his shoulder, and the caption says, you are not handsome any more than myself. Again, that's self-deprecating humor. But as to sending you back to slavery, I will not do it. Here again, Lincoln has evolved. Well, emancipation does not end the war. And Lincoln famously goes to Gettysburg in November of 1863. This is the only extant photograph of Lincoln at Gettysburg. The war began as a war to preserve the Union. The war becomes, the verb is important, a war to abolish slavery. But for Lincoln, it was always a war to protect and preserve democracy. It galled him that in response to his election, 11 states seceded, 7 initially and then 4 more after Fort Sumter. And the meaning of the Gettysburg Address, 272 words that redefine the narrative of America, grounding it on the Declaration of Independence and that last line, government of the people, for the people, by the people. And that's the emphasis. The emphasis is on people shall not perish from this earth. Well, the election of 1864 is coming around, and people say that it should be canceled. How can you have an election in the middle of war? And it looks like Lincoln will not be reelected. McClellan has gained in popularity, the former general. People are tired, they're exhausted, they want the war to be over. Lincoln will have no such talk about it. Even though he's so concerned that he might lose, that he writes a secret memorandum that he has his cabinet sign, saying that in the event of his loss, he will have to do what he can to bring the war to a close before his successor is inaugurated. Well, he is indeed, of course, reelected. And at his reelection, he says, we cannot have free government without elections. And if the rebellion could force us to forego or postpone a national election, it might fairly claim to have already conquered and ruined us. In that second inaugural, and by the way, the best thing you can do after today's talk, if you're inspired, go read Lincoln. Go read Lincoln. Read the Cooper Union Address. Read the first inaugural. Read the second inaugural. He offers his ideas for reconstruction. The war is winding down. It seems clear it's going to be over. How are we going to get back together again? That famous second inaugural, with malice toward none, with charity for all. Wait a minute. Lincoln was not going to have any retribution, no revenge, no violence, no show trials. He says in the second inaugural, judge not that we not be judged. His opponents lose their minds. What? Judge not that we not be judged. Didn't they start the war? Didn't they defend slavery? Aren't they responsible? Lincoln didn't want any part of it. He wanted to find a way to restore the Union by recognizing the departing Southerners as citizens. Here he is trying to figure out how to repair or heal. He had to get out of Washington. He was sick of what was going on. He takes a trip. His son Tad is with him. He shows up in Richmond, the capital of the Confederacy, on April 4th, 1865, as it falls. He walks through the streets. He goes to Jefferson Davis's house, the Confederate White House. A general comes up to him and says, "Mr. President, what should we do with the defeated rebels?" He says, "Let them up easy. Let them up easy." And then a week later, the war is over, and he's back in Washington. And throngs assemble in front of the president's house, the White House. He has to speak. He knows he has to speak, but what do you say? What do you say? What is it that he's going to say? He comes out and he sees a band playing, and you guys will appreciate this. And he says to the band, "Strike up one of my favorite songs." He tells them to play Dixie. Now, was Dixie his favorite song? No. Much more what you performed was his favorite song. But it's a conciliatory gesture to the defeated South. He finally comes out to deliver, and this is going to be his last speech, because he will be assassinated 3 days later. I wrote a book about that as well. And here's his opening line. "We meet this evening, not in sorrow, but in gladness of heart." It's such a Lincoln line. Not in sorrow must come first. There's not a family that didn't suffer a loss during the Civil War. More than 750,000 killed, wounded. And Lincoln personally suffered the loss. His son Willie died in the White House in February of 1862. And as president, he bore those deaths, personal and military, on his shoulders. So we meet today not in sorrow, finally, but in gladness of heart. What a phrase. You know, we're not happy, we're not overjoyed, we're not triumphant, we're not spiking the ball in the end zone, but finally, we can breathe. Okay, one more thing. In that speech, he supports giving the right to vote to black men who fought and who were educated. This is a man 10 years earlier said, "I do not believe in the political and social equality of blacks." But no. He understood now. What is the meaning of democracy if you can't vote to elect representatives who are going to support your interests? And so he supports giving black men the right to vote. Listen, I'm not naive as much as you may think that I am. There's political expediency involved. Guess which political party black men are going to vote for the next 70 years? Yeah, the Republican Party, right? That changes under Franklin Roosevelt, where they shift to the Democratic Party. But that's not the reason for doing it. His assassin is in the audience and hears him say this. And he says that's the last speech he'll ever give. And while the plot to capture or assassinate Lincoln was already in place, John Wilkes Booth is inspired to act in some ways based on Lincoln endorsing black suffrage. We don't think of Lincoln as a martyr to civil rights, but perhaps we should. On that last day, Good Friday, April 14th, 1865, Lincoln was in a good mood. He was happy. He took a carriage ride with Mary Todd. We know this from Mary Todd writing about it later. They talked about what they wanted to do after the war was over, after he finished his second term, and he said how he always wanted to see California. And maybe they would take a trip to California. Oh, and by the way, he was thrilled that Congress wouldn't be back in session until December. He didn't have to deal with those guys. he thought he would handle the issue of Reconstruction. Mary Todd later said, and every time I say this, I get emotional, that Lincoln turned to her and said, "Today the war is over, and I'm happy." I began by telling you that I love Abraham Lincoln. I want to close by telling you about someone else who loved Abraham Lincoln. W.E.B. Du Bois. Now, who is he? He's one of the great African-American historians and activists, the first black man to get a PhD from Harvard University, the author of The Souls of Black Folk in 1903, one of the great books about black identity in America, founder of the NAACP, editor of the Crisis magazine. And at the time of the dedication of the Lincoln Memorial, he's thinking really hard about Lincoln. And here's what he says. He says, "I love him not because he was perfect, but because he wasn't, and yet he triumphed. The world is full of illegitimate children. The world is full of people who are educated in the gutter. The world is full of people born hating and despising each other. To these I love to say, do you see this man? He was one of you, but he became Abraham Lincoln." Thank you, guys. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thank you. Oh, my goodness. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. Don't thank me. Thank Abraham Lincoln. I have one last slide, if you could put that up, just to share some information before we get to some questions. I don't know if you can get back to that or not. Right after this is another slide. Yes, no, maybe. Do I need to press the bell? There it is. So if you want to reach me after today, you think of a question, please feel free to email me. You will discover that if you email me, I will respond almost immediately because I have no life. So I'm checking email constantly. And if you're interested in finding out more about my work, a lot of my Lincoln essays are all on my website, as well as my Springsteen essays, for what that's worth. And so please feel free to reach out or visit my website. And then I guess it's to you guys for Q&A, and Mary, thank you.
Well, thank you so much, indeed.
Thank you.
Lou, wonderful insights, and just a wonderful, like I said in the introduction, you're able to transport us into his world and his mind, and that was really amazing. Thank you.
So much.
Really wonderful. So while the ushers are collecting some of your questions, I will ask you one or maybe two questions. Okay. How might, as we know, Reconstruction evolved the way it did, different phases, and ultimately did not live up to its initial promises. But how might Reconstruction have differed, would you think, if Lincoln had lived?
That's a great question. So how might Reconstruction, I mean, we love hypotheticals, or as we call them, counterfactuals, and they can be useful. I mean, we suffer from them, because if only Lincoln had lived. So I've thought about that. I wrote a little bit about that. It's tempting to think that Lincoln, as great a leader and politician as he was, could have solved the intractable problems of Reconstruction, but I think it's naive to think that, right? Clearly, he would have been better than Andrew Johnson, who immediately identifies with the Southern Democrats and allows full-blown racism to just emerge and terrorize the free black population. So where he would have made a huge difference, I think, is in continuing the support for the 4 million former slaves. This is a critical issue, the transition from slavery to freedom. Remember, the Freedmen's Bureau was one of the very first organizations created to help with that transition. Andrew Johnson vetoed its recharter. So by providing federal government support, I think he would have made a big difference there. But no one, I think, could have defeated the emergence of the Ku Klux Klan, all the sort of narratives about the lost cause that emerged, and the ways in which Reconstruction turned out to be an incredibly challenging period for free blacks.
Thank you, thank you. Great questions here, and a trove of them as well, which is wonderful. But let's start with a very practical one. What is the difference between anti-slavery and abolitionism?
Oh, I love that. So, I mean, an abolitionist was fully committed to ending slavery and ending slavery now, immediately. William Lloyd Garrison, talk about 1831, right? I write about him in that book. You know, he begins to liberate in 1831. If slavery is a sin, you don't compromise with sin. And it has to be ended now, immediately. Now, you could be against slavery, but not necessarily believe that it's practical or possible to immediately end slavery, right? You may be a gradualist. You may believe that slave owners should be compensated for their slaves. You may believe, like Lincoln, in colonization. So you're against the idea of slavery. You're just not sure how to go about abolishing it. I think that that's the sort of distinction. An abolition, I mean, all abolitionists are anti-slavery. Not all people who are anti-slavery become abolitionists. Make sense? Okay, good.
So many good questions here. Disregarding the war, what did Lincoln accomplish? So what else did Lincoln accomplish during his presidency?
Well, so one of the things about the presidency, right? So one of the advantages, if you will, that the Republican Party had is they could pass any legislation that they wanted to pass. And so they literally remake America with legislation that gets passed during the 37th Congress. The Transcontinental Railroad, the Homestead Act, the Morrill Land Grant Act. Here's something you guys may feel less positive about. The first personal income tax is passed during the Civil War. Yeah, it's pretty amazing. When I lecture about Hamilton and Jefferson, I also talk about Hamilton like rolling over his grave saying, that's brilliant. You know, we can tax people, not just tariffs. So the legislation that gets passed by he and Congress completely transform the face of America.
Thank you. Somebody asked, after Lincoln replied to Grace, did she write back?
No, she didn't. She apparently, so Lincoln's train route from Springfield to Washington passed through Chautauqua, and she showed up at the rail station. It's unclear whether she actually got to meet him or not.
Right, lovely. But great to know that.
Yes,
Great to know
yes,
that
yes.
she showed up.
She was there, yes.
Yeah, it's a lovely vignette.
Oh, it's incredible.
Absolutely. Why did he choose the VP that he did?
So he gets rid of his vice president in part because of what I said. He thought that Johnson would help him win the election, right? Johnson, military governor of Tennessee, had been a slaveholder, got rid of his slaves. Remember, the election up until September of 64 is up in the air, And so, you know, Hannibal Hamlin from Maine isn't going to help him as much politically, he thinks, as Andrew Johnson from Tennessee. And again, you know, we live life forward, we understand it backwards. Had he known that Andrew Johnson was going to become who Andrew Johnson became, he never would have made the change. But we don't know that, and he didn't know that. And so that's why the change gets made.
A very interesting question there,
Yeah,
absolutely.
yeah.
And another one, what was Lincoln's relationship with Jews, and did he know any?
Wonderful, wonderful question. There's a great book about Lincoln and the Jews. My mind is going to block on who wrote it, but you could find it out. He's at Brandeis. He's the first president to appoint a Jewish chaplain. And Grant's major error, he regretted it the rest of his life. Grant, during the war, issued an order banning Jewish traders from military lines. And Lincoln compelled Grant to revoke that order. In Cincinnati and in and around Illinois, Lincoln got to know a great many Jewish leaders and Jewish traders and had a very, very warm, affectionate relationship with Jews.
Yeah, a side of Lincoln less familiar,
Oh,
obviously,
absolutely.
than, than the other big focuses. Many great questions. Had Lincoln lived, another quasi-counterfactual.
Right.
What about the 14th and 15th Amendment prospects?
Yeah, I think we still get those. I think that's the other part. Lincoln lives, I think we still get the 14th, 15th Amendments. We get greater support for the freedmen. But whether or not, the only way to have kept Southern Democrats from regaining power would have been to disfranchise them and to exclude them from running the state governments. No one did that, and I'm not sure Lincoln would have either.
Right.
Okay.
For
yeah.
sure, yeah.
By the way, I know there are a lot of questions here. If your question doesn't get asked, really, email me. I mean, it'll be great. I won't be able to respond this afternoon because I'll be in traffic over the George Washington Bridge because I'm driving back to New Jersey, but I'll hit you up tonight, all right? I promise.
Can you please talk about Seward as counselor to Lincoln?
So Seward's an interesting guy, really ambitious. He thought he was the brains of the operation in the cabinet, Secretary of State. I mean, again, Lincoln proved him wrong. I mean, anyone who ever underestimated Lincoln lived to regret it, right? So over time, Seward was sort of placed in the appropriate role as Secretary of State. Seward and Chase went at each other in the cabinet, and Lincoln is often playing peacekeeper between the two of them. As Doris Kearns Goodwin wrote, calling her book Team of Rivals, there's a different set of opinions within the cabinet. But Lincoln was the leader, he was the president. Seward, to his credit, was disappointed, devastated. I mean, Seward thought the nomination in 1860 was his. He won on the first ballot, but he didn't have the majority, and Lincoln came through as the sort of compromise candidate on the third ballot. But to his credit, Seward remained steadfast in support of Lincoln and the politics of the party.
In very tumultuous times.
Yes, very much so.
For him as well. Just one more on Johnson. How did Johnson change from freeing his slaves to opposing Reconstruction? What caused this change in attitude? It's
just that Johnson was always a Southern Democrat, and he loved having elite former slaveholding Southern Democrats come and beg him for pardon. He loved playing that role. And he didn't have any sympathies for free blacks or for Republicans, and so he just turns in that direction.
Sure. Maybe two more.
Sounds good. And then I have a last thing I want to say.
Given the times, the time it is now, can you please comment on Lincoln's relationship with General Grant?
Fantastic relationship with Grant. I mean, eventually he recognizes Grant's genius and appoints him the head of all armies. And look, it's a learning curve like anything. You know, Lincoln had no military experience. Think about that, right? He was a volunteer captain in Black Hawk's War. He later said that all the experience he had in the military was battling a swarm of bloody mosquitoes. That was it. But what does he do? He does the Lincoln thing. We know this because we have the cards from the Library of Congress that Lincoln was requesting. What did he do? He read. He read Henry Halleck's Elements of Military Strategy. He read books to better understand what was going on. I mean, time and again, he studied what was happening, and he came to appreciate Grant in ways that made them incredible partners. Because I walk around with random Lincoln documents. I know we're running out of time, but I have to share this one with you. It's your fault. You asked the question, all right?
I take all the blame.
So after Vicksburg, right? Vicksburg is the great military victory. It gets control of the Mississippi River. You have Vicksburg, Gettysburg, July '63. Lincoln hasn't yet met Grant. but he writes Grant a letter congratulating him on his victory. Listen to this. This gets at Lincoln more than anything. I should have put this in the lecture. He says, when you reached Vicksburg, I thought you should march the troops across the neck, run the batteries of the transports, and go below. I didn't have any faith that you knew better than I that the Yazoo Pass expedition and the like could succeed. When you got below, you took Port Gibson, Grand Guffin vicinity. I thought you should go down the river and join General Banks. When you turned northward, I feared it was a mistake. So that gives you something about Lincoln. Look at the level of detail. Wait, here it is. Here's the line. So here's the President of the United States writing to one of his generals. Ready? I now wish to make the personal acknowledgement that you were right and I was wrong. It's amazing, right? It's just amazing. So anyway, I'm sorry, I know I'm taking up time and we got to go, but good.
Yeah, that is Lincoln-esque for sure. So just to wrap up, there are several questions about today's political culture, and
it's a shame we've run out of time and I can't talk about those.
So I'm kind of merging and morphing them into maybe a question about what lessons, looking back and reflecting on Lincoln's legacy for us, what lessons do you consider most valuable for us today?
Being willing to say that you were right and I was wrong. Being willing to change your mind over time. Being willing to think through issues. I mean, look, there's always been partisanship in American history. I mean, I talk about Jefferson and Hamilton. I mean, they went at it, right? You know, it's what Lincoln as a political leader could do. How he could weave compromises, how he could listen, how he could evolve. That's ideally what I think we all sort of crave in leadership. And I'm going to finish with one thing. Dorothy told me she watched Spielberg's Lincoln the other day, and some of you have seen it, I'm sure, right? The film, Daniel Day-Lewis's Lincoln. If you haven't seen it, get on Netflix and go see that, all right? But there's a moment in the film where Daniel Day-Lewis is Lincoln, and he's perfect. He embodies Lincoln just brilliantly. Lincoln, by the way, had a high-pitched voice. You wouldn't think that, but he did. At one point in the film, Daniel Day-Lewis as Lincoln is sitting at his desk playing with his pocket watch, and he's tapping it back and forth. And all you hear in the soundtrack is Spielberg got permission to wind Lincoln's pocket watch and tape the sound. When we hear that sound in the movie, we are hearing the exact same sound that Lincoln himself heard. And I say this in part to remind everyone of the closeness of American history, of really the brevity of American history. It's not past, it's still very much with us. I once gave a lecture, and a man came up to me, and he said, would you mind saying hello to my grandfather who's sitting in the audience? And I go into the audience to meet this gentleman who is in his 90s, and the man says to me that he was at the final reunion of the soldiers who fought at Gettysburg, which occurred in 1937, and this man shook the hands of soldiers who fought at Gettysburg. Well, I shook the hand of a man who shook the hand. And again, we think it's far away, but it's not. And it's one of the reasons to continue to read history and study history and think about history. And I can't thank you, and I can't thank all of you for inviting me here today and for having this session. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you.
Thanks to Louis Masur and Mary Kelly for a stellar program to end our season. And just a few words. thank you also to the members of this historic church, the Peterborough Unitarian Universalist Church. We know a lot of thoughtful, conscientious collaboration and planning, and a lot of skilled work went into this renovation here. You should all be proud. This new chancel has enhanced our Lyceum programs, and as we learn the nuances of the space, it will serve us and our community even more. And we're going to begin to work on our program for 2027 next month. It's a great collaborative effort, and if you'd like to join us, let us know or leave a message on our website. And if you miss the Lyceum in the dead of winter, you can go to our website where you can listen to this again. And there's 100 other talks you can listen to. And you can join us for refreshments and for Louis Masur's book. And don't forget your umbrellas. Okay, thank you.